Wir machen weiter in unserem Programm. Jetzt werden wir mit Professorin und Propagandaforscherin Cécile Vaissié sprechen, die über das Kreml-Netzwerk in Frankreich sprechen wird. Wir haben ein kurzes technisches Problem. Sie hören mich wahrscheinlich gerade doppelt. Ich glaube, jetzt haben wir das behoben. Cécile wird mit uns auf Englisch sprechen. Vielen Dank. Thank you very much that you are here with us, and you will speak about the Kreml connection in France. Thank you very much. Ich überгebe jetzt das Wort an Cécile. Я переведу быстро по-русски. У нас сейчас будет профессор, исследователь влияния пропаганды Cécile Vaissié, Кремлевская сеть во Франции. Она будет говорить по-английски, без перевода. Спасибо огромное, что вы сегодня с нами.
Vielen Dank, es ist ein Vergnügen für mich, hier zu sein. Und и простите, что я не буду говорить на русском, просто чтобы мы как-то смогли немножко как побыстрее, и без перевода я буду говорить действительно по-английски. So what are these Kremlin networks in France that I wrote a book about? And this is like the book I wrote about that was published 5 years ago. Well, basically, all the elements that Alexei Kozlov has been talking about for the past half an hour, they're all present in France as well. And at the end, I'll do like some kind of a comparison between the means that are being used in France and the means that are being used in other countries. But basically, they are the same things. So what are these Kremlin networks? Let me explain extremely simply. It's just, how does it work? It's just like you have some kind of a pyramid. And at the top, you have like Mr. Putin, his friends. You have Mrs. Simonian from RT. You have Vladimir Solovyov from Первый канал. And they tell you things they believe or they don't believe in. It's another problem. They tell you, for example, that Russia cannot exist without Putin. There's no Russia if you don't have Putin. They tell you that Nazisti, Fascisti have taken the power in the Ukraine. And they tell you that the Crimea has always been Russian. And then they're at the top of my pyramid. And then at the bottom of my pyramid, you will have like my French neighbors, regular French people who have never been in Russia, who don't intend to go to Russia. They don't speak Russian. They don't read anything about Russia. But then they tell you just the same things in the same world. They will tell you, oh, but you know, you can't like change Putin because if there's no Putin, there's no Russia. They'll tell you about the fascists in Kiev. They'll tell you about like the history of Russia they don't know anything about, and the fact that they believe that the Crimea was always Russian. So how does it happen that regular French people or regular German people repeat without having any conscience of it the arguments, and I would even say the words that were created in the Kremlin? So this pyramid is constructed in such a way that at the top you have this Russian propagandist who get paid very well to assert such things. And for example, just look at the inquiries that Alexei Navalny made in Russia about some of these propagandists, about the home that Vladimir Solovyov has in Italy, about the fortune that Mrs. Simonian and her husband made. And you understand that these people, they're extremely, extremely well paid to create this kind of propaganda. And then they send it literally to the tubes down the pyramids so that it will get to my nice French neighbors. And my nice French neighbors, they will get some kind of a reflection of what's being conceived at the top of the pyramids. And they'll say it, not being paid for it and not having any mean intention towards anyone. But by repeating these things, my neighbors will also become a part of these networks without knowing it, without being paid for it. And they might also convince their friends that, yes, Putin is a great president. He does everything for his people, and there couldn't be any better president for Russia. So this is just a first example to make you understand that in these networks, you have people who get paid very much to create these kind of novels, this kind of news, and you have people who don't get paid at all, who just repeat. And this, in a way, this is the difficulty, in the sense that it's very easy to make the difference between my neighbors and Mrs. Simonian. But it's not very easy when you have some bloggers, some people, the kind of Alexei was talking about, to understand if they're doing it, if they're repeating it because they believe in it, or if they have some kind of a job in this pyramid. As we understand, in this pyramid, the media are absolutely essentials. I remind the younger generation that during the time Yeltsin was in power, basically you had free medias in Russia. And even if they were not fully free, you had different groups, different opinions, different oligarchs who were financing different media. So you had the freedom of information in Russia at that time. It was not perfect, but it was much better than it was before, and that it has become. Under Putin, and as soon as he came to power, all the big media, starting with the television, were brought up by Putin's friends, and especially at the beginning by Gazprom Media. They don't destroy them. They don't take them. They buy them. So they say, it's just like the law of the market. So now we are doing that way, and it gave them the possibility to control everything that was said on every big TV channel and in every big newspapers. And for example, if you're an immigrant, a Russian immigrant in Germany, and you watch Pierre Canal because you're tired, you're coming back from work and you want to see something, to watch something that's not too tiring and that may be fun, you are absorbing, if you want it or not, this professional propaganda that's being cooked up for you and for which this Pierre Canal has been brought. And also, there is another kind of propaganda, which is not quite the same as for the Russian people in Russia, that's being prepared for the people living in foreign countries. And like Alexei said, we have, for example, Sputnik on the social medias. We have Russia Today, and you have Russia Today in France, you have Russia Today in Germany, you have Russia Today in other countries, and they're all a little bit different, although there are some common points, and I'll go back if I have time to these common points. As you may know, in some Baltic countries, where people remember very well the Soviet ways of diffusing propaganda, these channels have been banned. For example, I think in Latvia is the last country that banned Russia Today. And of course, the Kremlin screams, and the Kremlin says at once that it's an attack against freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Why? Because the Kremlin knows very well how to use the Western freedom of speech against the West without giving this freedom of speech to their own citizens. So you have people sitting in jail right now in Russia because, let's say, the people around Navalny and Navalny himself, because they wanted to prepare some kind of a different information about different things. Well, they're sitting in jail or they had to emigrate. In France, Russia Today is not so much about saying that Russia is beautiful. They don't say Russia is beautiful. That was the Soviet time. In the Soviet time, they were telling the French people that everything in the Soviet Union was just wonderful. Now they're not saying that Russia is beautiful, but they take real problems that exist really in France and they make them a much, much bigger than they really are. For example, and you'll understand what I'm talking about, on Russia Today, they talk endlessly about the Yellow Vest movement. This movement exists. There are demonstrations, there are clashes between the government and the people on the street. So it exists, but they're showing it all the time. It's just like a joy, you know, we can talk about the Yellow Vest movement. And they will say almost nothing about the demonstrations in Russia. So it's all a question of proportion. They will tell you, oh, we talked about the demonstration in Russia, but it's like 2 minutes, and about the Yellow Vest, it's like 5 hours, just to tell us, see how many problems you have in France. And also, and that is in France, just like in Germany, they cultivate fears in front of problems that exist, but that they make much bigger. Let's say that in Germany, in France, we do have this question of migrants, and we do have different points of view. Should we take more migrants? What should we do with them? How to help them? Well, you know, like you have like really different positions in each society, and it's normal. But on Russia Today, they will tell you that migrants, they just rape women and they rape young girls and they're just going to kill you. And so they want you to be scared, because they understand that when you're scared, you you can be much more easily manipulated. So they cultivate the fear of migrants, the fear of Muslims, the fear of terrorism, the fear of Western decadence, problems that, once again, exist, but they just make them bigger. And some people, very honestly, may accept these presentations as their point of view and say, for example, you are a Yellow Vest who's been taking part in a demonstration, and you're very happy because you say, see, like Russia Today, they talk about us like simple people. So it's a good channel. But let's remember that within this media pyramid, you have the paid propagandists at the top, the unpaid useful idiots at the bottom, and between them, you have, and it's been shown within the past years, and again, Alexei talked about it in Germany, you have all kinds of bots who are paid to write on social media. So all these people, and you know, it's the Russian Free Press who started writing about this fabric of trolls that is in different Russian towns and is now in Africa also. And you have people who get paid to write that, for example, Macron cannot solve problem and he's the worst president and everything. And they write in French also. And as soon as there's like an article that criticizes Putin, you have like thousands of bots saying you don't understand, Putin is the best, etc., etc. You have group and pages that were created, for example, on Facebook, so as not to look Russian, but to diffuse the propaganda that was created in the Kremlin, and they get paid to do that. So it was, for example, very well demonstrated in America during the presidential campaign that you had pages and groups that were looking as if they were the expression of Black Americans, and at the same time they were not Black Americans. They were like not far away from the fabrics of troll. You have bloggers who will take up the information from the Kremlin. Some of these bloggers are paid, some are not paid. But for the bloggers who are paid, just look at Navalny's last inquiry, and they show that in Russia, these bloggers are paid like 30 times the regular wages just to write a couple of things where they will quote the main of the idea of the propaganda, and then they'll be what they wrote will be quoted, let's say, by French bloggers who may or may not be paid, but the idea in that way will get to my neighbors. So that is for the media. Of course, you have the politicians. And why? Because the politicians, they're a target, but also a means of influence. And they might even become, if you're lucky, president of the country. And if the president of your country has been bought, I'm not like designing anyone, but it just like may happen in some way. And in France, in a way, we have been very lucky because it was proven before the French election of 2017 that Marine Le Pen had gotten a loan from a Russian bank. And that Russian bank was located in the Czech Republic and later disappeared. And when I looked at this bank to understand a bit better who these people were, I couldn't help notice that there were many ex-KGB officers working in this bank, and it's a small bank. And I thought again about it when I heard about the GRU plausible actions in the Czech Republic. So Marine Le Pen got Russian money. And, in a way, her party, Marine Le Pen's party, is basically the same thing as your AfD, Alternative für Deutschland. Basically, it's the same ideas and the same position. Well, we have proved that, yes, she accepted this Russian loan, and there was never ever any proof that she had paid the money back. It's not only that. Marine Le Pen, she got to meet Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin before the elections. And there were very nice photos when they meet and they shake hands. Plus, she was, just like the AfD, she was very much promoted by the Kremlin media in France. Although she was not the only one to be pushed. Alexei said, if I remember well, that the AfD had like three times as much time as other party. Well, in France, it wasn't like 3 times, but yes, that Marine Le Pen, she was the favorite candidate. She has a lot of space on the Kremlin media. She had the money, she had the meeting with Putin. So that's a very clear example of some kind of intervention. Nothing is illegal. It's not illegal to take a loan from Russia. It's not illegal to meet the president of Russia, but it was a way of Russia to try to influence this campaign. And it's not just a question of money. It's also, let's say, if I keep on Marine Le Pen's party, you have personal relations that were developed. For example, on the Russian side, you have Konstantin Malofeev, who is very rich, and you may have heard that he played a part in the beginning of the war in Ukraine. You have Alexander Dugin, who speaks French very well, and he's interfering with people working with Marine Le Pen. And also, and that makes things a little bit like more interesting and more complex. Within the French people who would vote anyway for the extreme right or for the AfD in Germany, you have people who honestly believe what Arte tells them, Russia Today tells them, for example, about migrants. And also, they have some very false representation of Russia, representations that are developed also by Russian medias. What false representation? For example, many of them believe that Putin's Russia is a country where you have big family, where there is big families, where there is a real policy to help big families. And they believe that it's a country where, as they say, you build Christian churches, whereas in the West, as they say, we destroy them. And that it's a country that fights against LGBT. At the same time, if you look at statistics, you will understand, it takes you 5 minutes to understand, that there are much more big families with many children in France than in Russia. In Russia, they have a big problem with demography. They have a big problem because people don't want to have many kids, except maybe in the Caucasus. And in France, there are still people who have like 4 children, 5 children, 6 children. Also, you will understand that in Russia, almost everybody will tell you that they're Orthodox, but that very few go to church, except when it's Easter, like today. And that all these things about LGBT, honestly, we could talk about for 2 hours, but they are more like a smart polytechnology move than anything else. And it's used to scare people off democracy in post-Soviet countries. because, it's not like a big deal, and suddenly it appeared that it's like the biggest problem. It's not a problem, and it's certainly not the biggest problem. But it's become central in Russia, but also in Ukraine, but also in Georgia, but also in Poland. So what I mean is that in this myth that were created, for example, about Russians having a lot of children because it's such a Christian country, rationality does not fully work. But rationality has to be used and deployed because there are honest people who believe in this myth. I would also say that this myth, and maybe also the smell of money, also work on other parties on the right, but more democratic, more regular parties. And one of the problems that has France, and I think it's the same in Germany, is that many people in the military forces vote for the right or the extreme right. And they believe in this myth. They believe that Russia is a country where you have like an officer at the head, but that everything is according to the law. But I would add that the Kremlin, and something in Germany, is also very appealing for the French ultra-left, but for some different reason and some of the same reason as for the ultra-right. Why? Because the Kremlin propaganda plays very much also on memories of the Soviet Union. And for example, you know that in France, we had a very big communist party that you didn't have in Western Germany. And you had people who voted for years for the Communist Party. And now every time when they see like a picture, I'm just joking, with a red flag, a red banner, they are just happy and saying, well, it's some kind of a continuity. And of course, it's not logical because you cannot be like the most Christian country, like the right beliefs, and the continuation of the communist country, like the ultra-left belief. But that's the way it is in France. And I would say that the ultra-right and the ultra-left, they rejoin on some point in the Kremlin propaganda. That is the rejection of the United States and of NATO, the rejection of the European Union and the euro. And that works also in Germany. But I must say that it was rather funny to see how Mr. Mélenchon, who is at the head of a party of the ultra-left, confused Nemtsov and Navalny during a TV interview. They didn't have any idea who they were. And how, before going to Russia, I think it was in 2018, to take part to this défilé, Besmiertny Polk, on the Red Square, he said that he had not been in Russia for 30 years or so. So he didn't hide it. He knows just very little about Russia, but he promotes an alliance with Russia against America. So here again, you don't have much rationality. You have like professional propagandists, and you have very naive people who don't know very much about Russia. And of course, they have to be informed. But anyways, that's the way Emmanuel Macron was elected president in 2017. And what will happen next year for the next election, we'll see what will happen. But you don't have just like the media and the politicians in this pyramid. You also have the business world. And people in business in every country, especially in Germany, they want to make money, and there's nothing wrong about it. They make deals, they create jobs, they pay people, they help the economy. So it's very good for everyone. Except that with Russia, it's a little bit different, especially since the sanctions. And who are some of the biggest fighters for the abolition of sanctions? Well, among them, some of them are businessmen who prefer money and job to morals, although they also understand that in Putin's Russia, it is risky business because even foreign businessmen can be sent to jail for no real reason. And it was recently the case with an American and a French investor banker who had worked in Russia for years. But they believe that you can make money with everyone. And, like in Germany, you have this big deal around the Nord Stream 2 And this is basically like geopolitics and money against like morals and helping your allies. And to make sure that the businessmen will think that way, an organization was created in France in 2004, the French-Russian Dialogue, and it's meant to promote business between the two countries, which would be very fun. Why not? At the head of this structure, you had till 2019 Vladimir Yakunin. Kozlov was talking about him, but like the translation lost his name somewhere. Vladimir Yakunin is very active in Berlin as well, and he had created, like Alexei said, this dialogue of civilization. Who is he? He's an ex-KGB general, so he knows how to manipulate people. He's one of Putin's closest friends. He's super rich, and again, you can learn more about him reading what Navalny wrote about him. And now he's more in Berlin than in Paris, and he's trying to attract businessmen and politicians to Russia to make deal and to fight against sanctions. So it's interesting that they sort of duplicated the same structure. You also had in this French-Russian dialogue, next to Yakunin, you had a French vice president, Thierry Mariani, who is a politician who works now in Marine Le Pen's party and is the most active politician in France against sanctions, trying to promote an alliance with Putin. And within this French-Russian dialogue, you have very respectable and not so respectable businessmen and politicians. And you know, many of them, even in France, they remember very well that, for example, your German Schröder was nominated at the head of the board of directors of Rosneft. Rosneft, it's gas, it's oil, it's money, and when you are the board of directors of Rosneft, you just receive huge amounts of money without doing anything. So all businessmen, they say, okay, I'm not like an ex-chancellor of Germany, but if I could, you know, like have a little chair in some of these boards of direction, I won't have any financial problems till the end of my days. So they all tell you about their love for Russia, but there is also the question of money, sometimes of lots of money for very few, but all the others, I can tell you, and I've got proofs to show, they all dream about this possibility. One of the people who was also at the head of this organization, but under Mariani and Yakunin, is Alexander Trubetskoy, who was, for example, elected for 1 year at the head of the board of directors of Sears Invest. Sears Invest, it's also a big company. It's also a lot of money. And it means that this Trubetskoy, he was in this business structure, but he's also like a typical example, or not typical example, but an example anyway, of a French person who has Russian ancestors and who is playing very much into the Kremlin propaganda. Because parts of the diasporas are tools in the influence that the Kremlin wants to develop in France, just as in Germany, just as everywhere. In France, as you know, we have a lot of people of Russian descent, but we have very different Russian-speaking diaspora. We have, for example, French people whose great-great-great-parents came 100 years ago after the Bolshevik Revolution. They're absolutely French, but they may have Russian names. They may talk Russian, but not always, a little bit. And very often they go to a Russian church. But that's about it. They're French people. We also have French people whose parents came as dissidents in the 70s and the 80s, but they're not, there are few of them anyway. And we have people, just like in Germany, who emigrated from the ex-Soviet Union after 1991. Contrarily to Germany, we don't have much of a Jewish diaspora. And of course, we don't have this quote unquote German immigration of people who were considered as Germans when they were living in the Soviet Union, and often think of themselves as Russians now that they're living in Germany. In France, we know very well how the Soviet Union tried to recruit agents in the Russian diaspora in France in the 30s and later, playing on nostalgia, playing on love for Russia, not only playing on money, and mostly not playing on money. We know very well how the Soviet Union tried to attract immigrants back to Russia, to the Soviet Union, although nothing good was expecting them. Therefore, the question of who was working for the KGB was very often discussed in immigrant circles. And there are good reasons to guess that some French people with big Russian names were recruited in Soviet times and are still active in their own ways now. I won't be given any name, but you just read the last book written by Soldatov and Baragan about the compatriots and the immigrants. They give names, at least in the English version of the book. I haven't looked up the Russian version one. I don't know if they give names, but in the English version, they give them. And there is no reason not to believe that younger collaborators of the FSB have not been sent or recruited, as sort of proves it the example of Anna Chapman or Butina. But we also understand that it's not the majority of immigrants, but there are like some of them. What we see is how a politics has been conceived and built during Putin's time to, first of all, enlarge as much as possible the concept of diaspora. And that's when they used this word, they created this word, they made a law about this word, compatriot, sootcheственnik. And for example, a French person who was born in France from French parents who doesn't speak Russian can be considered to be a compatriot of free Russian people who were born in Russia and lived all their lives in Russia, if this French person had like some kind of a Russian grandmother and maybe like goes to an Orthodox church. Putin also wanted to enlarge as much as possible the concept of the Russian world. This is the whole idea of Ruski Mir. Ruski Mir, it's all the people who have some kind of a connection with Russia. It might be like a family connection, or it might be like people like me who don't have any familiar connection with Russia, but who speak Russian. And we are considered, nobody asked us if we wanted to be part of this Russian Mir, Ruski Mir, but we are considered to be part of it. And then Putin and the people around him, they defined this politics to have an influence on these people, these compatriots, Sootcheственniki, and these Ruski Mir, through the Council of Compatriots, that is Sovieti Sootchestvenikov, that depends, and it's not like a little part in the embassy. They depend of the embassy, but they are supervised by Rossotrudnichestvo, we talked about half an hour ago, which is now directed by Yevgeny Primakov, the grandson of Yevgeny Primakov. If you remember Yevgeny Primakov, who was very smart and very educated, very well educated, he became the head of the SVR, that is of the Russian external secret services, after a life where he had been a collaborator of the KGB. So it's sort of very clear that the KGB, the FSB has taken control on the politics towards the compatriots living, especially in Western country, but everywhere in the world. And Alexei said the politics of compatriots say that officially they want to help Russian-speaking immigrants. They want them to keep a good relation with their country of origin, which would be very nice, and nobody would have anything against that if it wasn't a politics decided at the head of the Russian state to influence the heads, the presidents, the chancellor of the states receiving these immigrants. And I'm not making that up. It was said publicly by Leonid Slutsky, who was at the head of the committee supervising these compatriots in the Duma. The compatriots, that is the Russian immigrants or the Russian-speaking immigrants, they're also supposed to influence the society they're living in favor, not of Russia, but of Putin's politics in Russia and elsewhere. And it was done, for example, in 2014 by a public letter that was written and signed by white Russians who supported the annexion of the Crimea by Russia and defending Putin, saying that he was wrongly attacked by Western media who didn't, as they said, understand a thing about Russia. As I said, among these white Russians, some who live in France or in other countries hardly speak Russian, they almost never go to Russia, but some of them dream of making business with Russia and, you understand, of being at the head of a board of directors. So it's not just like big love. And here some questions should be asked to these compatriots, that is to the people we know who immigrated from Russia. We all understand that there might be nostalgia for the country of your childhood, that there might be love for the Russian culture and the Russian language and the Russian countryside, because the culture, the language, the countryside, they're all beautiful. But why did you come to the West at the end? Was it just because the kalbasa was better? Where are your loyalties? Do you want to be transformed by Putin and his teams into a big fifth column in the West? Because that's what they want, and they say it very clearly. And I'm sure that it's not what 99% of the immigrants want, but that's what Putin wants. And again, they say it, they express it extremely clearly. And I must say that I'm always amazed by recent immigrants who live in France and Germany, but vote for Putin. Because if Putin is so great, if you think that he's positive for Russia, that he's bringing like big changes and positive changes, why don't you live and work in Russia? And maybe the answer is that you're voting for Putin because you're watching Pierre Canal too much. So my time is almost over. I would say just a few things. That since my book was published in 2016, one of the three big structures that had been created to develop Putin's influence in France, along with the French-Russian dialogue and the Council of Compatriots, has disappeared. It was a think tank, and Alexei was also talking about think tank, the Institute of Democracy and Cooperation, that was supposed to influence the political and military elites. It was directed at that time by Natalia Narochnitskaya, who went back to Russia. And she's now cooperating with a younger Sarah Pilipin, the writer, who is often invited to France by Rosotrudnichestvo structure. So it all goes like round and round. However, many smaller structures remain or have been created, and some of them mixed paid professionals who are working on it with people more idealist, dreaming of some kind of Russia that doesn't exist and maybe never existed. Also, the Kremlin has intensified its fight to control the Russian Orthodox Church in France, and had a big success not long ago when parts of this Russian Orthodox Church rejoined the Moscow Patriarch after many years of conflicts, because religion can also be a tool of influence. And as a conclusion, I would like to stress a few points. What I've described very shortly looks very much like what was done at the Soviet times. Some of the same tools are being used now as they were in the 30s or in the 50s, and they have just been adapted also to include electronic tools and internet possibilities. But it all existed before internet. A big difference in France is that there are much less pro-Putin intellectuals than they were pro-Soviet intellectuals. They got burnt and they know it, so they don't like really defend Putin the way they defended, for example, Stalin. What I was saying at the beginning, this is my third point, these very same tools are being used in many countries. And now we have books and studies written about them, so we can compare. And between Germany and France, it's just very clear. But the Kremlin knows very well how to adapt these tools to each country and takes into account different points. For example, is there an important diaspora? What kind of diaspora is it? Is there a big level of economic dependency, which we don't have in France, but that they have, for example, in the Czech Republic or even in some Baltic countries? Do you have ex-KGB or Stasi collaborators who might be like still waiting somewhere for the happy days to come back? So we don't have that in France either. Or it's very few. I think in Germany, if you read like Reichschuster, it's a bigger problem. And to conclude, I really hope that one day we will be able to have a real and strong collaboration with Russia. But as far as I'm concerned, this collaboration will only be effective and profitable for both the European peoples and the Russian people when Russia will be a democracy and will respect its laws and international convention. Do I think that it's possible? Yes, I'm sure it is. And I think it's the main question. There are people who don't believe that Russia can become a democratic country. I'm sure that Russia can become a democratic country. And after all, we have examples around us. Let's say if Germany could become a democratic country and a friend of France after having fought against France for 70 years, then I'm sure that Russia can do it too and become a democratic country. Thank you for the attention. If you have any question, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vaissié, for your very interesting presentation. I have one question. We are experiencing right now in Germany quite severe increase in popularity of Russia Today, which probably can be because of this hard year and a lot of people who just are a bit disappointed, in measures, for example, against COVID measures, and so on. Do you experience something like this in France right now?
Let's say, I don't know if Russia Today is having bigger audiences because of the COVID. It might be. What is very interesting is that in every country, the COVID policy has become a big part of the Russian propaganda, of the Kremlin propaganda. It's just everywhere. And somewhere they're pushing like some kind of solution. Somewhere they're just disorganizing the whole stuff. So, and when I see, for example, in Germany, you have this Attila. You remember him, like, I think he's got some legal problems now, who was against vaccination. And he was going and he had this lentochka, Georgievskaya lentochka, the sign of that all Putin's partisans have. You understand that it's coming from somewhere. So I'm not sure about Russia Today. I know that their audiences have gone up because of the Yellow Vest movement, that's for sure. And I'm sure that I know that they're sort of spraying disinformation about vaccination. They're not the only one, unfortunately. And these are like the two big axes of Kremlin propaganda in Europe. On one side, the migrants, on the other side, vaccination and the way to answer to COVID, and the fact that you shouldn't be wearing masks. And of course we should, because it's if they make you wear a mask, it's supposed to be a dictature. Well, you have it everywhere. It's just like spreading a lot of false ideas so that people will reject their government. That's the main ideas. So yes, basically it's the main thing in France and Germany, just with local differences.
Yeah, another question. What do you think about these measures which were done in Ukraine, for example, or Latvia, as you said, just restrict Russia Today or some other channels? Do you think it's possible to make it in Germany or France?
You know, I will tell you frankly that before Russia Today opened in France, some of my friends contacted me and they wanted me to sign a petition against Russia Today so that it wouldn't open, because they were saying this is propaganda, we don't need it. And I didn't know what to do, so I didn't sign it at the end, because I know that Russia Today is really like the worst that it can be, and the worst image of Russia that can be. And on the other hand, I don't like, because like I'm a Western liberal, I don't like banning things. I don't like telling people you can't watch that. Let's say that now I wouldn't be totally against the idea. I think it's a lot better anyway to educate our people. We have to educate people. We have to dismiss this myth. We have to teach our children, and it's sort of harder and more difficult in this context. We have to teach our children how to recognize propaganda. We have to teach them how to recognize when they're being manipulated. And I think that it will be a much more useful, because if we don't have Russia Today, and in a few years we won't have Russia Today anymore, but we will have something else. So we have to educate people. And when I was showing that in a lot of on a lot of points, even the French people are not very rational. They have the reputation of being rational, but they're not very rational when it comes to Russia, and we have to educate this rationality in front of the myth that the Kremlin spreads, and in front of the propaganda that Russia Today is developing. I think it's much more effective than just closing the channel, although if it closes, I won't be very sad for a long time. Let's put it frankly.
Thank you very much again. We are having 2-minute break. And stay with us. It will be a teleconference with Igor Yakovenko and Mr. Heinemann Grude and Mr. Lech. Stay with us. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you. Good luck.